So, hello everyone. I just want to welcome you to our Zoom session. We actually have two more before the 8 sessions end. And remember, you won't upload that until you finish the actual course. So your um, log of attendance to the Zoom meetings, you don't do anything until you actually finish the course, and then you upload it to um, the Canvas course. So we're actually going to go through, again, like we did last time, we're going to go through the standards, and they're part of the course. But I find it really helpful when we point out the standards and the objectives, and then you provide examples. But before we start that, is there anyone who has, first of all, a clarifying or a technical question? And then later on, when we look at the standards, we'll get into actual experiences. So any kind of technical questions at all about expectations? Okay, so we're going to so just let me know if you actually let's see. So Sonia, can you see the screen? Yes, okay, great.
Yeah, it's clear.
So last week we looked at standard one, which was about fidelity and accuracy. And again, remember the standards are organized and they're national and international as well. They're organized by the name of the standard, and then you'll see in parentheses the module that it comes up in, and then the ethical principle, which is based on how an interpreter should behave, based on an ethical principle, which is about behavior. And then you have objectives underneath. And they're kind of performance standards or performance objectives. It's how you would actually perform. The other thing is in the modules, when you see these, typically the questions, there are like 3 questions. And, it asks you to rate yourself in relationship to, you know, what you feel is a strength. So you look at the objectives in the standard and you kind of mark them for yourself. You're not sharing them with me or anybody else. And then you're focusing on an objective, 1 or 2 or whatever you want to do, which you feel you want to work on. So this is kind of a professional approach to creating your own professional learning plan yourself, because you understand the standards and the objectives related to the performance of an interpreter. And then you set goals for yourself based on what you feel you need to work on. And remember, you don't you don't really share your assessment with me, but when you get to the discussion post, it'll ask you questions that you respond to. And again, when you respond to the discussion post, it's very important that you organize your responses by each of the questions. So you would label the question and then, thoroughly explain what you're thinking in relationship to the assessment. And then you would read other people's discussion posts, and then you would respond to them. And I just want to say that I'm very pleased with the responses to other people in the modules that I've seen. You're doing a really good job of reading other people's comments and then calling them by name and being responsive and doing a really good job of organizing your responses to every question in the prompt. So let's look at this standard, which is the second standard, and it's about confidentiality. So I'll read the first one and, we can talk about it and you can read it along with me if you want, or just listen. It doesn't really matter. Confidentiality, is a really important issue, especially because, we're dealing with students And so I think I also uploaded or put a link in the announcement about FERPA because someone asked about student privacy. And I'll put another link in USBE privacy department, student privacy or just general privacy. So privacy is a very important issue, especially with social media and cyberbullying and all of those kinds of things. So it's really important that interpreters never disclose any kind of information. You treat it as confidential, whether it's spoken by somebody or it's written in the performance of professional duties, and adhering to relevant requirements regarding disclosure. So what that means is being really clear about the student privacy and the privacy of the family and any issues that actually come up, whether it's discipline or special needs or IEP work for dual language services for a student who's learning English and also is neurodiverse. So this confidentiality goes to everybody. It means you don't go home and talk about your interpretation. You don't talk about it with your friends. You don't talk about it with your colleagues. Whatever is communicated and that you communicate from the teacher or the administrator with the parent and the parent back, you cannot share with anyone. The first objective, protection of privacy of all parties and the confidentiality of information. So this is a really important piece. So the interpreter talks to both the administrator and the family and says that he or she will respect the privacy of the meeting and that each side or each member in the meeting, in that encounter, has the actual right to expect that the interpreter will hold information about them in confidence, right? So anything that you discover about any of the parties in the meeting, it's important for you to make sure that you let those parties know that you're holding and you're respecting everything that they say confidentially, that you won't disclose or talk about what's happened in the meeting. Now, remember, if you have any questions, just make sure that, because you can raise your hand and I'll be able to see it on the screen that's being shared. So again, this is not only, federal law with FERPA, but also state privacy laws. And I'll look for some and put them up so that in this module, you can see how that's impacted the work that the interpreter does. So objective 8, the interpreter does not disclose information, again, whether it's spoken or you see it in a document or written outside of the situation without the permission of all the parties, unless it's required by law. And this you would talk over with the the people in education who are representing the educational system, because the issue ends up being that they should be familiar with the law. And that's why I'm adding, all kinds of things to the announcement and to not so much the modules, but in the announcements, you'll find like examples of really good responses that people have written, which is really wonderful. And I really appreciate that, your commitment and your integrity. And also, besides the examples, any laws that are really critical and important for you to understand, like, privacy laws, FERPA, and all those other issues. And remember, if you have questions, go to the person who's leading it or to the administrator. So if disclosing the time and or place of an encounter may identify the purpose, persons or content, the interpreter shall not disclose the information. So this is the whole issue. I mean, you can't be walking down, the corridor and talking to a friend and saying, this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I have a meeting with, this teacher, and this student, right? So even disclosing the time and the place could identify the person, the content, or, the parent, the child, whatever. So when it says confidentiality, I mean, this is really, really incredibly serious issue that we take seriously. Okay, look at 10. And there are only three of this, three of these, and we'll stop and then we'll go to the next standard because there are 8 standards. So the interpreter may, where collaborative work with other professionals is required, be briefed or participate in relevant discussions. And so if you notice, it says may, it doesn't say shall. So when there's collaborative work with other professionals, like a paraprofessional or a teacher or another interpreter, relevant discussions with other interpreters, members of the team involved with the other party, authorized representatives of the interpreting agency or service providing institution. Anyone receiving information to provide interpretation service is ethically bound to the duty of confidentiality. So this means that if you're doing collaborative work with another interpreter or with a team, right, you still maintain the issue of confidentiality. And you only share that when it's part of the purpose of the meeting and it's absolutely relevant to the discussion that you're having. Okay, so this is the piece that's really important. So with that standard, which is confidentiality, does anybody have any comments or questions or experiences they want to share where they're concerned that there, might have been some issues related to confidentiality or questions about it?
Can I share?
Yes,
Again, this is Patty from Ogden School District. Every class, I feel like I have to do a lot of improvement. If I feel like I have a bad habit, wrong habit, whatever you want to call, it seems like because we, in the past, I serve as an advocate at the same as an interpreter. Sometimes, families, when they just give me the look, I ask, is that okay if I release this information because they want to know? I ask the parents, and if they are agree, yes. If they are not, I don't share anything. However, now, because I'm learning every week, I feel like, I'm not even, in my position to ask that question anymore. I have to, just only do the interpretation, as you say, by FERPA. I never share anything that parents, they don't want it. I want to clarify that. It's not like in the past, I just share information that I don't suppose. What I'm trying to say that as an advocate person, sometimes the parent, they just give you the look like, can you tell, but not tell, I don't know. And when I ask them, do you want to share that information? If you don't want to share, don't share it. However, I feel, Priscilla, I don't know if it's appropriate to say or to ask how you can give me your advice or your point of view regarding interpretation, because I feel like right now I'm in the position like that I should educate administrators, teachers when I do interpretation, meaning like, hey, I'm going to do the interpretations, but in the past, because in the past, when they want to explain something and they already know that I have the knowledge, hey, go ahead and explain it to your own word, what I mean with this. And I just, explained it. Now I feel like I can't do that anymore. Like you say, it's the responsibility to ask questions and make sure like the parents understand what they're trying to say. It's not my position to explain that anymore. But my question is, what do you suggest me? Like just explaining to them what is my role as interpreter, and just tell them like, hey, from now on, it's your responsibility to ask questions, make sure like the parents understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of based on the context and your relationship with the administrator. So really, an administrator who says to an interpreter, explain it yourself, that seems to be not very responsible to me. I think a better way is to say, in my role as interpreter, I really should represent how you clarify for the parents what they need to know, and this is what they need to know. See, in that case, you're an advocate for the parent understanding when they don't understand. But the responsibility then you shift to the administrator by describing your role as the interpreter, right? Because the whole thing, fidelity in the very beginning, the first standard is important. Fidelity to what is being said by the other party. And yes, because we're in situations where we feel sympathetic and empathetic and we're an advocate, we have to be really careful because, again, in some ways, us trying to help somebody else ends up taking away the responsibility of the administrator and the educator, who should be knowledgeable enough to be able to explain clearly the meaning of what they're actually saying. So I don't know if that helps you, but I think the next standard might add to what we're talking about. Is that okay for now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Christelle.
You're welcome. Okay, so standard 3 is impartiality, which means you don't have preferences. And I know this is, I know this is hard. I find this in myself, someone, I'll just give you an example. Yesterday, I was invited to a meeting and it was in the refugee meeting. And so their guest speaker was a police officer from Salt Lake City Police. And he had a slideshow showing everything. Well, he talked about motivations of gang members to belong, to be a part of something, those kinds of things that we pretty much all know. But then in the slides, he actually showed and tried to explain. So he talked about the Norteños, which is, a Latino gang that I spent lots of time with in Los Angeles. But the way he characterized them was really disturbing to me. And one of the reasons was that he showed their symbol, and the symbol was actually the symbol of the farm workers. And even though that was in the slide, he didn't really explain, why that was the case. Especially since I actually have, hats with the symbol of the farm workers on it. So the question ends up being, how am I going to proceed with the people that I'm working with to say, everything that he showed really doesn't have anything to have anything to do with refugees as much as it has to do with ideas about immigrants in certain communities. So the challenge really is to maintain impartiality. For me, that's very difficult, by showing no preference or bias to any party involved in the interpreter. So when you have a family that's struggling, naturally, you're going to be obviously more sympathetic to them than the administrator or the teacher who doesn't really know the law and is actually trying to say something to the parents that they don't understand. So the role of an interpreter, and my role, is to be to show no preference to any party that is actually involved, and which means, how do we then help the people that we're interpreting understand our role in relationship to their responsibility? And I think that's really challenging. I'm still trying to figure that out myself based on this particular experience that I just talked to you about. So do you have any comments or questions before we go to the rest of the objectives? And I know this is a hard one from myself personally. I know this is a challenge.
Can I
Okay.
say something?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I have an example. I'm not sure if it fits more with the first thing with number 2 or with number 3 or number 4 or number 5,
That's okay.
depending on how you look at it. But so when I'm in the IEP meetings, one of the things that is said at the end every time is your child does not qualify for extended school year. And then they'll proceed to say, extended school year is for children who over the summer forget what they've learned. I mean, for children who over the summer will regress. So they will forget what they have learned. And your child does not qualify for that because, well, no, they'll say that. I interpret that exactly as it is said to me, or as sometimes they have me read it. So I will read it and I'll translate it exactly how it is. And I always say it. I don't necessarily agree. I believe that the school boards have money for programs over the summer, and I don't know what the cutoff is. I don't know how I
Yes.
don't know at what point a child qualifies for it, but I have never said anything about this, but I'm just bringing it up as a case for my
Yeah.
classmates and for you to weigh in on, because my son actually benefited from extended school year. We lived in New Jersey where they have excellent services for children with special needs. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just sharing something that from my personal knowledge, I feel that the parent should be pushing back on that and saying, I think my child would benefit from extended school year, but I've never said anything.
Yeah, well, I think that's important that you haven't said anything, but
Mhm.
I've never heard of anything as strange as that. I mean, that seems pretty strange to me.
Well,
So
I'm sure there are parameters that if the child tests at a certain level, but maybe these parameters ought to be looked at. So I don't know what to do.
well,
Right now, I'm not doing anything at all, just interpret as it's said to me and stay quiet.
yeah, well, you shouldn't do anything, but
No,
I think
no.
the other issue is it is actually more important because the question ends up being, why isn't there a rationale given? I mean, at the end of the meeting, when it says they don't qualify, what does that actually mean? I mean, the question should be, the child doesn't qualify because, and then so I'll talk to the special ed department
Mhm.
and then get back to all of you next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so then all the objectives are full communication not impeded by any bias or preference of the interpreter. And as I said before, this is a challenge for me, exactly for the reason that you were saying, Marta, because there's not a full explanation, there's not transparency about why and how decisions are made. Is it in the best interest of the child or not? And if someone is making that decision, why aren't the parents included in that decision? So, and thank you for bringing this up. It's very important. So 11 is the interpreter always remains impartial and informs all parties of the duty to remain impartial. So the issue ends up being, you have to be clear with both parties that you're impartial, that you don't have preferences and, you're not going to choose one over the other. Number 12 is the interpreter declines to interpret when she or he has a personal or any vested interest in the outcome of the encounter. Now, the reason this is important goes back to this idea of how are you an interpreter and then you have a role as an advocate. So if there's a conflict of interest, you know, the biggest thing that's important for the interpreter to say, you know, this is a conflict of interest to me, because there are two sides that I'm involved in, and so it's difficult for me to be impartial. I was asked to be on a board of a charter school that I really respect. And then I said yes, but after the first meeting, I realized that my involvement in the charter school board was obviously a conflict of interest with my USBE status. And so, you know, I said to them, you know, I'm sorry, you know, this is now clear to me that I love the school and I love the work you're doing on the board, but I just can't be involved. And, you know, that's totally up to you, but this is a way for you to think about what maybe other people don't think about is, you know, when they're on a board and they have a conflict of interest and they don't declare it, and then all their votes and their decisions are based on the interest of another party. Okay, so 13. The interpreter declines to interpret when his or her personal or other relationship with any party may affect or be perceived by any party to affect impartiality. Now, this is really challenging, and the reason it's challenging is, you know, I'll give you a concrete example. So when I'm invited by the district to be at a meeting with somebody at USBE, the district typically invites me because they want me in some way to object to what somebody at USBE is doing because they think it's wrong and not in their best interest. So what I do is I deny or I decline any invitation where a district has invited me, but they've invited somebody else from the agency. And even when I ask, you know, why are you inviting me? And then they'll kind of tell me, but not directly, that they don't really agree with this USBE policy. And they think that that I'll back them up. So you see the problem here? I mean, the problem is whether you agree or disagree, the issue is that you have to decline to be involved in a situation where it's even a perceived by any of the parties that you can't be impartial. Right. So that piece is important. We'll do the rest of them and then we'll open up for conversation. And again, you know, the interpreter declines to interpret when any situation, factor, or belief exists that represents a real or potential conflict of interest for the interpreter. So it's kind of just what I said. The difference is that number 13 is about anyone in the party that perceives you actually have, that you're not able to be impartial and be objective. Right, so those two things are actually different. 15, the interpreter discloses to all parties in the encounter any personal or other relationship that may affect or be perceived, and again, the interpreter's impartiality. So it's very similar to 13. 16, the interpreter informs the interpreter service agency organization when he or she has a personal or vested interest in the outcome of the assignment or when any situation, factor, or belief exists that represents a real potential conflict of interest that will impact the interpreter's ability to interpret everything faithfully and impartially. So the faithfully and impartially goes back to the first standard, you know, about interpreting just what people are actually saying. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and then we'll come back together and you can share experiences and we can have a conversation, whatever supports you now that you've seen these. Okay, so any surprises by the objectives or standards or anything that it brings up for you? I find this standard in particular about being impartial really challenging, especially since, you know, we're all advocating for the children. And oftentimes the people that we're working with don't understand the situation of the family. And I think that's always really challenging. Any comments or observations or experiences that you want to talk about?
My question, Christelle, how and then we're going to separate those two things, to be an interpreter and to be an advocate person?
Okay, when you're an interpreter, you have to be an interpreter, period.
Okay.
That's the answer.
Okay.
You can't be an interpreter and be an advocate at the same time. That's like totally impossible. Emotionally, it's impossible because you can't really do a good job of interpreting if emotionally you want to be an advocate, right? So the answer is you have to be an interpreter. When you're interpreting, you have to be an interpreter.
Yeah, probably. And then my position in the future, that will be not be an interpreter, just be an advocate, because I feel like people, they need more help with support as as an advocate. Interpreter, that will be for me easier if I have to, just talk, I don't know, in a meeting, or probably, to deliver some information. But it's hard for us. I don't know the rest. I feel like in my position as a community liaison, I see so many people that they are like, need the help because they don't know the system. Every time that they need an interpreter, is like, just, can you tell me what is going on? Can you tell me? I don't understand. Can you tell them this and that? I feel like they are so totally lost that they are not asking for interpreter. They're asking for a person who can advocate for them. So that is my dilemma. I'm not going to say like I don't want to be an interpreter, but I feel like probably if I have to choose, maybe the people, they are looking for you, not for interpreter, more for advocate person.
Okay, here's a different way to think about it. Okay. When you're an advocate, families need to know what the system is, right? That's when you're an advocate. You explain the system to them. If you're interpreting and they're confused, you ask the administrator to explain why things are happening so that you can interpret to the family. So you don't have to like say, I choose to be an advocate and I'm not going to be an interpreter. No, you have to know your roles in relationship to how you clarify what the family actually needs. If the administrator has no idea that the family is asking that they don't understand the system, then you have to ask the administrator to be clear about why they are doing what they are doing. That's the role of the interpreter. And in that, you're actually learning the kind of skills to be an advocate so that the families are knowledgeable about the system, right? So that is providing them information from the teacher or the administrator about why decisions are being made in a certain way. And you can still be totally impartial because you're giving information about a system that's not working for a family. Now, that means you have to be skillful in both and do it with integrity. That's all.
Yeah, that's why, Christelle, and thank you for the clarification. That's why in the beginning, when I ask you, when we do interpretation, that we have to, teach the administrator, hey, the family is totally not have idea what you're going to talk about. For example, are you a migrant worker? And the family responded, no, yes, I'm an immigrant. You cannot clarify that one. You have to continue but you know already that the family didn't understand what as a migrant worker.
Yeah, I know, but then it's your responsibility to tell the administrator they don't understand the difference between being a migrant family and an immigrant family.
So is that okay? I mean, because in the beginning, for some reason, I had the wrong concept that I cannot even say that. It's just my role is an interpreter. But like you say, is the administrator role to make sure like the family understand. But I know that most of the time the administrator is like, oh, they get it. I mean, they responded, so they continue. You as interpreter know that they don't understand. So probably I was wrong. I was like a Crystal in the past thinking like I cannot even say, you know, to the administrator, hey, she needs more clarification because it seems like she is not understanding.
No, you can do that, but it has to be transparent to the administrator. I mean, that's it, because you can't be making meaning to the family without the administrator knowing what the conflict is based on the information. See, interpretation is based on information. It's not based on anyone providing meaning, what something means, what the administrator means, because that means it's interpretation. You're analyzing and interpreting from your viewpoint. Not that your viewpoint's wrong, but the point is, it's the responsibility of the administrator to make clear what the system and the choices that are being made that actually impact the family and the child. Right? So in some ways, you have the role to interpret exactly what the administrator is saying and exactly what the family is saying. And when it's confusing to the family, right, then you say to the administrator, the family doesn't, she doesn't, or he doesn't, or whatever, doesn't really understand how you made this decision or why you're saying this. They're confused. Can you explain it better? They're the ones who have to explain it better, and you do the interpretation related to the information that the family needs.
Even when they don't say it, Christelle, even when the parents says they don't say anything, I mean, they just seems like they know.
Yeah, but remember the question is, there was a section where it's the role of the interpreter is also to read nonverbal cues.
Correct.
When you actually see this confused look on somebody's face, you say, you seem confused. And then you say to the administrator, I think she's confused. And then let the administrators, end up trying, because remember, this is kind of sad in a way. In some ways, you're actually helping the administrator become more educated.
Correct. That is my whole point, and I thank you so much for the clarification, because for some reason, I had the wrong idea that I cannot, hey, it seems like she don't understand. It seems like I was not allowed to do that. So now with all the exclamation, thank you so much. I can understand.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think it is confusing because that's the whole point of becoming skillful, right? I mean, that's the whole point of becoming a skilled interpreter. You're reading nonverbal cues by the family that you're interpreting from and with. And so you're not really advocating for the family. You're advocating for them to get the right information, right? You're not advocating for them to get around the system or to challenge the administration. You're not doing that. You're not biased and you're not showing preference. You're actually working and becoming skillful so the administrator communicates the information that the family needs. Right? That's the point. Marta?
Oh, I was gonna say, does that mean that we could say that we are also communication facilitators as interpreters?
I don't want to really, I don't want to change it. I don't want to say anything like that because
Okay.
really you're actually following the standards.
Yeah, of
And
course. Yeah.
so, and the national and international standards are very clear
Okay,
about the role of the interpreter not to be biased and have preferences,
right.
communicate directly the information that's necessary.
Yeah, I just meant like helping one person communicate with the other person impartially. Yeah,
Yeah, but let's just stick with the word interpreter. Let's not put communication in there
Oh.
because that's all that ends up
true,
being
true. Yeah, got it.
okay. Other comments. We have about 20 minutes and we don't have to stay the whole time, obviously, but these are really important. These are really important sessions to clarify for you how skillful you have to be. See, this is a great opportunity for you to develop the kinds of approaches to actually benefit the students in families who typically end up not having the kind of information they need, right, to be engaged with their educational opportunities for their child. Thelma, you have your hand up.
Yes. I just want to share that I feel comfortable right now because I was reading all my all you share on the comments. In some way I feel like I have some thoughts and I thought that it's just me. But when I read all of them, I just, was surprised that there is another one that felt the same way like me. So I learned from them. So I was like very clear for me. So I just want to say thank you. And I just recommend to read all of them because we're going to learn that it's just not you and you think the same way to other ones.
Yeah, Thelma, thank you so much. Every question that you ask or every experience you share helps all of us. I mean, you realize how much your conversation about your experiences and what you're confronting helps me to go back to USBE and say, okay, look, special ed department, here are these issues that are coming up for interpreters in IEP meetings. Can you help clarify this? When we clarify this, can we actually communicate it to all the districts and all the schools? But if you don't open up with questions and share with me your experiences, then I really can't even advocate for you, right? I'm advocating for the implementation of state law. And I still think there are a lot of people in schools who don't even know this is a state law. I'm actually pretty sure of that because of the weird questions I get. I'm not laughing because I'm happy, but it just seems really odd that there's a state law that's been on the books since 2022. We've had all kinds of meetings about it. They have to have a board policy. There was a district that just got their board policy approved yesterday. This is after 2 years. So you see, the public education system in the United States is the best because it's free, appropriate public education. No other country in the world has that, and the thing I worry about is the orientation toward people. I don't have anything against homeschooling, but my question is, how do students who are isolated from other students who are different than them, how do they become compassionate human beings if they're not connected to other people who are different than they are? How does that happen? Right? So to protect public education and the way in which we support every single student, whether a refugee, an asylee, an immigrant, undocumented, no matter who it is, whatever their status is, whether they're poor, whether they're wealthy, it doesn't really matter. The public education system in this country is not like the system in Britain. Is not like the system in India, is not like the system in, all the other countries in the world. And so to make it the best public education system that supports every educational opportunity that's available for every single student, no matter what their race, their religion, their color, their gender, whatever it is one of the most important tasks that all of us have. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege here to be with you. Okay, so I'll stop that, and we have 15 more minutes if anybody else would like to add anything.
Sorry, I want to add something else. My intention is not to take the whole entire hour, but regarding what you're saying, that we need to educate as well administrators and teachers or whatever, we are helping with translator. This week I have the opportunity to share the HB 302. And I feel like how powerful you can be when you educate another educator. Because sometimes administrators or teachers, because they're licensed, sometimes like we know what we're doing. And coming from probably a community liaison, who are you? But I have to stand up for parents that how in the world you're sending 3 pages long to fill out in a language that they don't understand. First of all, the document can be, no valid. Second, when I told them like a baila and have the opportunity, and thank you so much for you to put in the la and link in many places in this course, I was able to grab it, just place it. Baila, line 169 through line 171, read it. The paper has to be in their own language. And it's powerful, but I think like we need to stand up as well for what we're learning and educate educators, because we need to reinforce those things.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. I think that's the other issue. The other thing is the way in which you help educators and other people to better understand the purposes for what you're doing. Because sometimes people can be very defensive, especially if, just my viewpoint, if they're licensed, if they're credentialed, if they have, degrees or blah, 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 if they have that, then they end up getting defensive because, they feel like they're being attacked or, they don't know or whatever it is. So you have to practice, with a good intention of helping the educator and the teacher to be better informed, because it only benefits their students. I mean, that's really the whole point of what we're doing. How it is we work together ensures that every student has, an opportunity for an economic future in their family, which means, right, a good educational experience with all the opportunities that they deserve. Okay, any other comments? So again, I just want to thank all of you and tell you how much I appreciate Zoom meetings. This is the 6th in the series of 8, but you'll always have access to them on, our playlist with the interpreters. So you can always go back and listen to what you've experienced, or even, there are other issues that come up in the 7 o'clock meeting as well. So, it's just a good opportunity to listen to what other people's experiences are, as I think Marta said and Thelma said, when people ask questions and they share their experiences, then it helps all of us, right? We're a community of learners, learning together, working together, learning from and with each other. So thank you so much. My knee is getting better. I hope one of these days I'll be able to go up some stairs without much effort and visit more schools, which I'm putting on hold until the fall. But anytime you want me to stop by your school or spend time in a literacy center, for next year, just email me. You have all the information that you need. And again, thank you so much for your dedication, your commitment, and your love for the children of Utah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Estrada.
Thank you. Have a good night.